awesome afternoon to you, Ben. Are there any developments this lunchtime? What's the latest?
Well, the latest is our understanding on the situation involving Marc Guéhi and Manchester City is that City are stepping up their interest in the pursuit of Guehi in this window, a player that has emerged as their number one transfer target in terms of that central defensive recruitment. He's a player that we know Crystal Palace have obviously got great service out of, but he's also a player that almost left in the summer, as you've been discussing, to go to Liverpool. The fee at the time was around £35 million, and it's our understanding it would take a fee that was too good to turn down for Palace to sell him in this window. And from the player's perspective, we also understand it would take essentially an offer from Manchester City that would be too good for him to turn down when you consider he's got 6 months left on his Crystal Palace contract, which means that in the summer, given the size of the clubs that have had conversation with his representatives about signing him, we know that Bayern Munich, for example, one of those, the likes of Barcelona, Real Madrid have been closely monitoring his situation. The player himself can essentially write his own contract, can't he? The figures could be astronomical when you consider he'd be available on a free transfer in the summer. However, it feels as though this deal is getting a bit closer in this window, which would be a huge potential signing at this stage of the season for Manchester City, who are desperate for defensive reinforcements.
Back pages tonight here on Sky Sports News, bringing you a first look at the sports stories in the morning's newspapers. And joining us are ESPN's senior writer Mark Ogden and the Daily Mail's football editor Ian Ladyman. Welcome to you both. Let's quickly run through the back pages, some consistent themes. As with most back pages, the Express leads with Crystal Palace. The headline says Palace in Wonderland, Wonder with an A, and no fear over X-Factor. Carrick shrugs off jibes from Keane & Co. The Guardian also have Crystal Palace as their top story. Palace turmoil, Glasner to quit in June, and Guehi is heading to City. The Mirror says Selhurst Park. Palace boss Glasner says he's off at the end of the season, and skipper Guehi looks to be on his way to City, and Carrick keen to ignore wife jibes from Roy Keane. Daily Mail back page features Ian's exclusive interview with Elliot Anderson. I wouldn't be playing for England if I hadn't signed for Forest. We'll discuss that with Ian. Sun also splashes with Palace, but the headline focuses on Guehi. On your marks, Guehi seals 20 million City deal, and get set, Glasner off in the summer. Plus go, Carrick eyes flying start. Times have an interview with Manchester City's Tijani Reinders, supermarket to superstar. Reinders tells Paul Hurst about his journey from working in Aldi to Manchester City's midfield maestro. And Manchester City close in on £20 million deal for defender Guehi. Also carrying the Palace news around Glasner leaving Palace a year after that FA Cup glory. And in the Eye, crumbling Palace is a headline. An East End soap opera, how Nuno nearly lost his job at West Ham. We'll look ahead to that huge match, Spurs against West Ham. Let's start, though, with the back page of the Express. And I'll come to you, Ian. Palace in Wonderland. Glasner's exit bombshell as Guehi set for City, and Mateta could leave too. I suppose losing to a National League North side was pretty bad last week, but how lower Palace tonight?
Yeah, it's a bad day for Palace for sure. I remember standing in the interview area after the cup final last year, talking to Steve Parish, the Palace chairman, with a number of other journalists, and Glasner's future was on the agenda during that conversation because it was known that he was not under contract for very much longer. And it was clear then from Parish's answers that there was an issue, and that there would be an issue, that he was dealing with a very, very ambitious manager. And here we are today with all those concerns and those fears have come to pass. The Marc Guéhi situation, moving to Manchester City, isn't going to help them either. What I would say about this is that you can't dress it up as a positive. Of course you can't. Glasner's clearly a talented manager. Guehi is one of the best players. However, there are other Premier League clubs that that have upwardly mobile Premier League clubs such as Brighton and Brentford, who have managed to turn this kind of situation into a virtue. And what I mean is that you have to be prepared for it. If you look at a club like Brighton, you know, they lose Graham Potter, so they get De Zerbi. They lose De Zerbi, so they get Hertzler. They lose Caicedo. They lose Cucurella. They lose Robert Sanchez. And yet they manage to lose them on their own terms, sell them for big money, reinvest, move on. Brentford have done it. They lose Thomas Frank. They lose Visser. They lose Mbumo. They've lost Ivan Toney. They've lost